Welcome to On My Couch. My name's Damien. I'm the owner of IMC Group, and what IMC Group does is we work with individuals, teams and organisations to enable change and to achieve outcomes, and really it's about helping people work better together. Welcome to another episode of On My Couch, and so when we put this topic or this program together, it's really about actually talking to really interesting people about particular topics that we wanted to explore a little bit more. Today is a special edition of On My Couch because we've got three O'Malleys. We've got our co-host Sue O'Malley, so I'll let Sue introduce herself in a minute, and we also have our cousin Mary O'Malley, who I'll introduce it in a minute as well. So three O'Malleys. This should be a really interesting conversation. Before I introduce Mary, Sue, do you want to just introduce yourself?
Thanks, Damien. And you're right. Yes, it could be quite crazy with three O'Malleys all on the same screen. And given the infrequency of which we all get together, it might be hard to keep the conversation to the brief that you've provided. But nonetheless, my career is been 30 plus years in property and asset management, working in marketing and across facilities and operations. And currently I'm on a couple of boards. So I have what I think they call a portfolio career, where I get to, again, work with some great organisations and to help people work better together. So thanks, Damien.
Cool, terrific. And Mary, welcome. I'll allow you to sort of, introduce yourself in a minute. But when we have these types of conversations, we generally focus on leadership and culture and strategy and business, and really, this is a topic we have explored, startups previously and community-based startups, which is really sort of the conversation we're hoping to have with you, around community-based social enterprises, startup cooperatives. There's many hats that you wear in terms of, Primal Vision, and also managing communication and stakeholder relations. I'll let you tell your story, but really keen to have this conversation with you. And a couple of quick questions that that I wanted to explore as we go through. Given the many hats that you have, any tips for time management? There is a reference in your bio about synthetic biology, so interested in learning more about that. And I'm curious, given the many hats that you've got on, when you fill out the section, when it says occupation on the form, what do you write?
Well, it's a tricky one because I do still wear so many hats and always have. So what I put on the form quite often is writer producer, because it covers a lot of bases. Sometimes I put communications consultant. But yeah, so basically I'm the owner or co-owner of Primal Vision Productions, which has been going for about 30 years. And that's primarily a documentary and video production company. And then I work part-time as a communications and government liaison professional with, wait for it, the ARC Centre of Excellence in Synthetic Biology, which is a national research centre based in Macquarie University, but I live in Mallacoota, Victoria, and we'll talk about being a digital worker later. And then, yes, I'm a co-founder of the Wilderness Collective in Mallacoota, which is an emerging social enterprise. So they're the three main hats I'm wearing at the moment. And yeah, time management you asked about. Actually, interestingly, I've always juggled stuff, like even when I was, because TV work and video work is often piecemeal. There's a lot of time in between paychecks. So I've always done lots of other things to keep the money coming in. So I've never had a problem really getting work-related stuff done. I just know what has to be done and I power through it. And I sort of have a mental checklist of the more critical tasks that I've got to get done. But that's what I realised is that's meant for about the last 30 years. I've been revving at a very high speed most of the time. So what I've had to learn is actually to time manage my health, the personal aspect of my life. So now in my calendar every week, I've got, I do personal training online with my Sydney mates, which is how I sort of keep up my friendship and my health. And then I've scheduled Pilates, which is a community thing. I've taken up learning the harp, which you can probably see in the background there. So I scheduled that in. And so, yeah, this is the first time in my life that I've actually, documented time for myself. And that's been really important.
Fantastic.
So to come back to synthetic biology, you didn't explain what that is.
No,
Mary,
it's
please.
a hard one to wrap your head around. So basically, synthetic biologists turn microbes into little factories that make stuff, generally in a more sustainable way than we currently do. So think of it like these little Pac-Man microbes that eat up waste. They've been programmed to eat up waste, and the output is usually some product. It might be a biofuel or a more sustainable chemical or alternative fabrics, biomaterials, that kind of thing. So the centre that I work for has a really strong focus on coming up with alternatives to the use of fossil fuels in manufacturing, and using the waste that you find, in the regions as a resource. So rather than seeing it as waste, it's actually a very valuable input. So I'm excited about it because I've always had a great passion for the environment, but also I now live in the regions. And so anything that's going to bring more prosperity and opportunity to the regions is a really good thing to be working on. So I very much enjoy that work, and my job is basically to work with the scientists, the researchers, on getting telling the stories and working, with government, or trying to communicate with government as well on, what might be the policy levers that we need to pull, to really make a go of this. In America and in the UK, it's huge, but there's been massive investment in the bioeconomy. And we've got great capability here, not so much investment yet, but it's seen as one of the critical technologies of the 21st century. So it's good to be working in an area that's sort of pioneering and potentially doing really good stuff. So that centre's been going about three and a bit years, and that's got 7 spin-out companies already, which is pretty good going.
Wow. And I think we'll pick up on that in a minute, because I think Susan talk to us, ask questions around the social enterprise and community-based business. But I'm now having seen the harp in the background and heard you're taking up lessons, I'm really looking forward to hearing it at the end of our discussion.
Well, that won't be happening. I'm sorry, Damien. I'm on lesson 3.
Okay.
Unless you want something as basic as hot cross buns or something.
Perfect. And quite, that'd be appropriate right now, given
Yeah, that's it.
Yeah. So you better get it back on track.
So just as an aside question, how do you learn about that sort of new innovation and technology? What's your way of picking that up? Because you've described it beautifully for a non-educated person, but how do you learn new stuff, I suppose?
Yes. Well, I think that's why I still put writer producer on the forms, because those basic journalistic skills have stood me in really great stead all my career. So I started off on the Adelaide Advertiser in our hometown, as a young journalist, and have sort of branched out from there. So I just asked those basic questions: who, what, why, where, when, what is this in layman's terms? Why should I care about it? Why is it important? How does it work? And I work with the researchers to help tell that story and take away the jargon that makes it unintelligible for the likes of us. Yeah.
And particularly when you're after funding and community engagement and those, you've got to be able to, talk in layman's language, because otherwise people's eyes roll back in their head and they go,
that's right.
Yeah. Get me out of here, sort of thing.
Yeah. When I first started doing this kind of work, which was at UNSW many years ago, I was always worried that the researchers would see it as dumbing down their science, and some did, but not many actually. I was really pleasantly surprised that there was a willingness for most of the researchers I work with to engage and tell their story, and with the right relationships, it becomes a lot of fun to tell these stories in an imaginative way.
And will this transgress to a social enterprise or something in the region? You referred to regions. How will this impact on the regions?
Well, there's already some startups in the region. So because it's using waste, like sugarcane waste, for example, or brewery wastewater, for it to be economically viable, it's got to be the businesses have got to be co-located near the source.
Mhm.
So there's already some facilities established in places like Orange and the Hunter Valley, and in Queensland at Mackay. They're the sort of processing plants, fermentation plants that are needed to take that waste product and then scale it up so that it becomes, you know, a viable output. So it's as I said, it's reasonably early days in Australia compared with the US, but there's some companies that are based in Canberra and regions. There's one, a lot of the startups from our company is still based in Sydney because it is early days.
Yep.
But the opportunity is there to take agricultural or dairy waste, or, you know, whatever, even municipal waste, you know, and do something with that. So that makes it very interesting for you know, potential for new businesses in the regions and a new workforce as well. So if you've already got brewery workers, you know, trained up in fermentation, it's not a huge step to scale, you know, to train them up in precision fermentation, which is the process that is needed for a lot of this biomanufacturing to take place.
Damien.
Oh, sorry. Cool. I thought I jumped in. And so, I mean, Sue started heading us down this path. So, you know, social enterprise, community-based businesses, you know, what is how would you talk about, or how would you describe a community-based startup?
Okay. It's basically social enterprise, in essence, is business for purpose.
Yep.
And it can be for profit or not for profit. So, you know, going back to your previous question, I'm working with one of my co-founders from the Wilderness Collective. And what we're trying to do now is look at all the waste streams in Mallacoota. We want to get a waste audit done. And our hope is that we can build social enterprises off the back of those waste streams, which we won't necessarily personally run. We want to get them up and running. We want to do the research. We want to find the most viable waste streams. And then we hope that we can create social enterprises for somebody else in town to run. So it's about creating new opportunities with that business for purpose model, which I think just philosophically tends to work in small towns like Mallacoota. And I was thinking about why. You know, I think it's because in towns like ours, which are quite remote, you have to be naturally innovative because nobody's coming to help you with a lot of these things. And there's a very, very strong spirit of volunteerism. I think you'll find that throughout country Australia. So, you know, to then make that, you know, a business, but that gives back to the community seems to fit quite well with the ethos of a place like Mallacoota, I think.
Is it worthwhile maybe just talk to us a little bit about Mallacoota, because you know, we've got people that sort of watch this show from different parts, or, you know, how, you know, can you give us a 1 minute summary of Mallacoota, where it is, size? You talked about it being slightly remote. Can you talk to?
Yeah, depends on your perspective.
Yeah. Yes,
but,
that's a very
so
good point, actually. Yes,
it's quite near the New South Wales southern. So it's like the southern New South Wales Victorian border. You know, we're about I think Genoa, the nearest town out of here, is 14 kilometres from the New South Wales border. But we're in Victoria, so we're at the very end of a massive shire. Like it takes 3 hours one way nearly for me to go and register the car in Bairnsdale. Because they tend to collate, you know, put all the offices and services, whatever, in the bigger towns. So it's sort of one road in, one road out. It's in a beautiful national park. It's massive string of beaches. The town is clustered around a gorgeous lake system, very large lake system. It's very beautiful. It's been a hot holiday spot for years and years and years. But increasingly, people like me coming to live here because, you know, this thing called Zoom allows us to do that. Yeah.
And you mentioned, you know, the establishing a social enterprise. You know, how do you go about doing that, you know, in a place like Mallacoota? So how do you go about, establishing the support you need,
Sure.
to do this type of work?
Well, the Wilderness Collective, which is the one I co-founded with 4 other women, it sort of grew out of the bushfires.
Okay.
So that was the impetus for it.
Yeah.
And a young colleague and I were on this economic subcommittee it was the recovery committee after the fires, and looking at, it was recognised after the fires that we need more economic strings to our bows, because with the fires and then COVID isolated this town for a very, very long time. And everyone realised, well, it's so vulnerable, it's so based on tourism. What happens when that tourism dries up? So we were looking at economic opportunities and what needed to happen to become more resilient. And at the time, I'd just moved here. My colleague was studying online, and we had the fires took out all the cables that were going to come for NBN. So we were operating on 4G. When the tourists came, you couldn't even open a web page. You would have to get up at 1 o'clock in the morning to do your work, because you had to get internet when you could. Our house wasn't built yet. I was in this shitty bedroom and trying to angle the camera so you couldn't see everything in the background. And we realized pretty quickly that we needed this co-working space. So it started off as a vision for a co-working digital hub.
Yep. And
I could see, like, as I was Googling, I came across this academic in Sydney who researched digital nomads. And I thought, well, that would be great. To entice digital nomads to a place like Mallacoota would mean that you could entice them off peak in those quieter periods, when the tourists have gone home. There's lots of accommodation here. To have digital nomads coming and bringing their ideas and, their energy to a town like Mallacoota would be a game changer. So it kind of grew from there. More people came on board with their visions. And, obviously we canvassed the community for what they wanted. We had, I was looking at the minutes last night of the first meeting, and everyone said, yes, we want this and we want it now. We need this space now. Didn't happen straight away. But yeah, it was basically having the support of the recovery committee was a great help, because that got them the attention of government. Fairly early on in the piece, I was in touch with the East Gippsland, the Economic Development Unit of the Council, and they were very helpful. And in fact, they funded a feasibility study, which was very important.
Yeah.
So we got that work done, and that told us that probably just co-working alone would not be viable. It needed to have some other activity like education. So that led me, us down the path of having conversations with TAFE and unis and whatever. I was looking always at what's government policy for digital in the region. So that led to conversation with the department that ran the Regional Digital Fund, and that gave us our first tranche of money for a program. We were talking to the foundations or whatever. East Gippsland Community Foundation has been such a great help, in this area since the fires, and they gave us the first lot of money to actually find a space and fit out a space. Finding the space was really, really hard, but it's the way I guess I approach any project. Who are the interested parties? You map your stakeholders, you communicate and your vision clearly, and then you make sure that you're part of the conversation.
And is that the sort of the same process then that you're following? We talked about that you're starting up, trying to create that social enterprise coming out of waste. Is it the same type of engagement approach in terms of engaging the community and business as well?
Well, yeah, it's very early days with that one. My colleague and I are just having our first planning meeting next week.
Great.
But I'm already in my head.
Yeah.
Mapping out the stakeholders. Who do we need to talk to? Who are our likely partners? We've already talked to the council. They have a very engaged and really smart waste and circular economy team. So they've been very supportive. And so yeah, then it's looking at who else is really pushing the circular economy barrow.
Yep.
And I know some of these people already, because this is where my paid work dovetails. So a lot of the work that I've been doing for the centre in Victoria has actually led to networks that will be very useful for this purpose as well.
Okay.
Yeah, so it's finding out who you need to talk to at the end of the day,
Yep.
and then building a plan around that.
Cool.
It's it's amazing how much what you're talking about, that circular economy, and how it contributes to, you know, us leaving the earth in a better place at the end
Yeah.
of the day. I mean, sustainability in its purest form is the capacity to endure. And it seems like what we see in the media, sustainability is all about, you know, alternative forms of energy. But there's so much more that we can be doing to reduce our carbon footprint.
Yes.
That's not just about coal or gas or what have you, but that seems to be the only song that we know how to sing. And therefore, people, I don't think, probably really appreciate that sometimes it's not the big things that you do. There's no magic bullet. It's actually a lots of all the opportunities that you're exploring that make the most significant contribution.
That's right. And the partner that I'm working with, Dr. Tricia Harley, is always says, from little things, big things grow.
Mm.
And if we can do this well here in Mallacoota and do become a model that hopefully other communities can follow. And yeah, you can only do what you can do in your own patch.
Mhm.
Yeah, and yeah, it's lovely that I am working on a bigger scale with this National Research Centre, and that's great. But you're right, there's so much more to it than energy. You know, sometimes it's just keeping rubbish out of landfill for a bit longer by repairing stuff, you know, and somebody's just chosen to hammer outside. Sorry about that.
Talking about, no, they're emphasising the repairing. Yeah, that's adding weight to the point that you're making.
Yeah, so that's right. So what we intend to do is just getting this waste audit. We've applied for a grant to have that work done. You need to sort of see what kind of volumes you've got, what, you know, where is the biggest opportunity, and we think maybe it's waste glass, because there's nowhere for like wine bottles, for example, we've got the Victorian deposit container scheme here now, so and that's been really successful. But that doesn't take wine bottles. So, you know, what happens with the masses of bottles in the pub and the golf club and whatever, and, you know, and my household and others.
Still, no, I was sitting there quietly, just, you know, thinking, yeah, maybe we could make a contribution to that as well.
Yeah, correct.
Yeah, so I mean, the trick, again, something I've learned from some wiser people than me in the last year is don't jump to solutions straight away. Like, just sit with the problem for a while, and then research, and then, you know, I think the right solution or the right technology or partnership will come along. So we'll see. I mean, I really hope that in a small scale, the synthetic biology, the use of microbes in a small scale can happen in towns like ours, but it remains to be seen, because you have to see if it's economically viable. But, you know, in principle, you know, you could be processing something here or gathering something here, then sending it to a, you know, say Orbost, which is not that far away, in a bigger town with more land for a facility, and, you know, something could be processed there and then sent on up the road to, you know, say you produced an alternative fabric, you know, it might go to a community that turns it into, you know, some beautiful piece of fashion or sustainable art, whatever. You know, these are just dreams at the moment, and, you know, but it doesn't matter, you know, have a vision and see what happens.
Absolutely.
So just coming back to just Mary now, like, you've obviously, this is amazing work that you're doing. And you met, obviously we know that you're from Adelaide originally, you've lived in Hong Kong, you've lived in Melbourne, you've lived in Sydney. So how has that sort of, that worldview, if you like, shaped what you're doing now, and how have you connected all of your experiences?
I think, well, through my filmmaking work Hong Kong was obviously living in an Asian community for a long time, with a very strong, you know, emphasis on community, family connection. And then a lot of the filmmaking work that I've done is with Indigenous communities, and same thing, very strong on family, you know, connection, sustainability. So all of those things I think have fed into my philosophy of life, and I think maybe why I fitted in better than I thought into a small community, because it is about that connectedness and community and you know, doing your bit kind of thing. Because I used to say to my husband, he's from Mallacoota. I'm never moving to Mallacoota, Larry. Just get that out of your head. It's too far away from my family and friends. I am never, ever, ever moving there. And then came the fires, you know, and we'd already sold our house and in Sydney. And so here we are. And
and no looking back. So yeah, we wanted to talk about digital connectivity. Damien, do you
Yes.
want to raise that?
Yeah, well, I mean, you've mentioned that a few times, Mary, and that sort of, you know, helps. That's one of the things that, you know, brought you to Mallacoota, and you know, and also the, you know, the digital nomads as well. So, you know, I suppose we just, when Sue and I have been really lucky, we've met some really, you know, interesting people, and you know, from all around the world, having these types of conversations. We spoke to Lisa, who's a bit of a startup guru in Luxembourg, who was delivering workshops into Singapore from Luxembourg, and you know, one of the things I took away from that conversation was, you know, the power of the positive power, you know, that digital can have on towns. So it's just curious, is that something that you know, that is, I assume that's something that you've bought into, that
totally.
that's positive contribution. Sometimes we talk about, you know, we talk about the impact of digital and we go straight to the negative, but it sounds like you believe there's a real positive impact from a digital perspective.
Absolutely. I'm a total comment. I mean, it has enabled me to have, I think, a really rounded life.
Yeah.
Because I can work for this great centre. It's a national centre, so I'm dealing on a daily basis with people, you know, all over the country. Most of my colleagues are in Sydney, but I'm dealing with researchers in Queensland and Western Australia, you know, ACT, etc. So it opens up your world, basically. Being a digital worker opens up your world in a great way. And then I have no traffic, I have no commute. I have a number of, you know, beaches and push tracks, and we've got a boat that we can go out on. So my life after work, you know, is really rich. And as I mentioned earlier, I still stay in touch with mates through, you know, activities online. So my personal trainer lives in Central Coast, New South Wales. My mates are in Sydney. We've got another one that joins from Canberra, and then me from Mallacoota. So yeah, it's just basically when we're talking about this as a community, when we're talking about establishing the Wilderness Collective co-working space, we were saying that basically the mantra is we may be remote, but we're not disconnected.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, we are connected to anywhere we want to be. And so what that means for the regions is that workers like me can actually contemplate having a career in places like this, provided they've got good leadership. Like, I'm really blessed with the leaders at the centre. They've always trusted that we will just get on and do our jobs. They don't need to look over our shoulders. I've always really flourished with that kind of autonomy. So I think it requires a mindset for companies to allow their people to be in places like this. But, you know, potentially what it can do for the regions is really stop that exodus to the cities that is just draining regional Australia.
It's interesting because, I mean, that's I suppose what you've got me thinking about, and you mentioned it before. But you know, if you think about, you know, what's possible, you know, and if you dream big, you know, what is actually possible for towns and communities like Mallacoota, thanks to the digital connectivity. What?
The tagline for the Wilderness Collective is "A life lived fully in Mallacoota." So what that means is, you know, if you design it the right way, and you've got educational facilities here, which we now have, and you've got and you're training people up in a range of skills that allow them to engage in the digital world, then, you know, you've got a broad, you know, palette, you know, work-wise, that you can draw on. You know, you can basically have more flourishing communities if you avail yourself of all the opportunities in the digital world.
And it sounds like, and I'll hand back to Sue, but it sounds like also, you talked about flourish, and you talked about also stopping that, that movement, but, also you talked about actually attracting. So if we get this,
Yeah.
the opportunity there is actually to attract people to places like Mallacoota that
Yeah.
potentially 20 years ago, that wouldn't even be on the radar.
No, and that's why I used to say I was not going to come here, because the work opportunities then were so limited. But now it's a very different kettle of fish. I didn't want to give up the work that I did to come to a small town with very few job opportunities. But it's very, very different now. Attracting, like there's a whole digital nomads. Mean different things depending on where you are, I think. So in Asia, they're very big. And some countries have really courted them with varying results. Like in some areas, like Chiang Mai and Bali, I think there's been some negatives too, in that it's changed the place and the culture somewhat. I don't see that necessarily happening here so much, because they're a different kind of digital nomad. Those kind of people tend to be more techies that go there for the cheap lifestyle, the cheap. And they want more facilities than you would ever get in a place like Mallacoota. So they want fancy accommodation, they want the good coffee, blah, blah. It's not that we don't have good coffee here, we have very good coffee here, but yes. I think they're just different. I think they're just different people that would be attracted to a place like this. If you love nature and you really enjoy just getting out there and bathing yourself in nature, and you love wildlife, and yet you can work online, then you will really enjoy a place like Mallacoota. So I think there was work to be done there, and I think there's perhaps down the track a conversation at the policy level, because already it's made a difference to towns like Mallacoota to have the overseas. So we have a lot of visiting European travellers, I guess, and they have to come for 8 months or something to the regions in order to qualify for their visa. So that's been great. So it's really helped the workforce. To have like a digital nomad visa could be an interesting thing to explore. But and as I said, other countries have done it with varying degrees of success. There's a few things like tax you've got to get your head around, but ostensibly, if we want to bolster our regions, things like this, I think, are well worth looking at.
That's a great segue into the sort of one of the questions that we had on our little briefing sheet here. Is we've Damien and I have both spoken to Linda Wong, who runs One Runway, operates out of Geelong, Ballarat, etc. So what would your advice to others like you that have found a beautiful part of the world to live in, that want to make a contribution back to that beautiful part of the world, and so what would your advice for those in regional communities that want to do something similar and look at a startup or a support group or a vision for a social enterprise?
Well, first of all, come to the regions, because you won't regret it. Find out who else is working in that space. I mean, I was very conscious when I came here that there's been people here doing stuff for like 30 years, and you don't want to be the Johnny come lately who comes in and says, I know all the answers, because you don't. So fit in with your community first of all, and partner with like-minded people in that community. Then look around you at who else is doing this. Like I would hope that anyone would contact me, and our philosophy is not to compete but collaborate. So we're happy to share our learnings, and I've met Minda online, and I think that collaborative spirit is very strong in the region. So find who else is out there, and do it. Just there's a lot of knowledge out there. There's a lot of organisations working in the social enterprise space. So it's there's information and knowledge and programs and whatever to get skilled in that kind of work. So
just do it. That's what I took away. Just do it. So Mary, we could keep on talking. So and it's been great. Sue, I always ask you what many insights from Mary, but what has Mary got you thinking about? What's your key takeaway. Mine's just do it, so you can't have that. What else has Mary got you thinking about?
I think it's a very interesting this whole work from home debate, and I think you touched on that. And it is quite interesting when it seems to be very challenging for some organisations, and I'm not sure whether, but it's obviously essential when you live in a regional community. And I thought that was sort of my takeaway, is that you've got to consider where everyone lives, not just where you live, in terms of where you work too.
Yeah, I saw a swing back after COVID, after things opened up a bit more, and they were trying to, shoehorn people back into city offices and whatever. But I think the horse has bolted. I think there's so many of us who go, no, if you make me go back to the office, I am quitting. Because it's so good on so many levels. I love going to Sydney and seeing my colleagues face to face, but it's always a joy when we do that. And then you go home and you do the things. Because if you think about it, I worked in offices for years and years, and half the time my boss was out at meetings all day, never saw them anyway. So why do you have to commute way across, through Sydney traffic and whatever, to get to an office all the time? It's
Yeah.
crazy.
And I know Damien's trying to wrap me up, but just do you think there is an experience piece that you go for, for people that have been in the workforce for a number of years and have had that traditional style of working?
Yes.
Who now do work differently? There's obviously a maturity that goes with that. But if you're getting your first job at, you're straight out of uni or straight out of high school, do you think that perhaps the work from home is a different lens to it?
Yeah, I do. I think at that age, you probably need mentors and colleagues around you a bit more than you do at my end of the career. So some kind of hybrid model, is probably good. But yeah, I think it is, and that's the quandary that I think country towns face, in that to give young people the richness of experience, sometimes it still does mean going away for a while.
Yeah.
And then people come back when they have kids quite often.
And that's the key phrase, isn't it? It's around actually what you're creating is an opportunity for people to choose to come back.
Yeah.
If they feel as though they have to leave, then there's something to come back to, and as opposed to historically, potentially, I only came back when I retired.
Yeah, that's right.
Now I can come back when I'm at a stage in my career where I can make this work.
Yeah. And that's going to mean a richer, more rounded experience for all country towns, because they can't just rely on retirees.
Mm.
No. Terrific. So, Sue, thank you very much. Mary, thank you very much. Great to reconnect, and you've a really rich discussion, really interesting discussion, and you certainly, in addition to just do it. Sorry, you've got me thinking about my own approach to waste. So I probably need to sharpen that up a little bit as well. So
and just come and visit your cousin. It's been a lovely family reunion. Thank you so much.
So thank you again, Mary. Thank you, Sue. In the meantime, if you want to learn more about IMC Group, have a look at our website, which is imc-group.com.au. Otherwise, look forward to seeing you next time we're on our respective couches. Thanks a lot.
Thank you.
Cheers.
See you.